String buzzing, muffled chords. It can be incredibly frustrating, especially while you're trying to fingerpick and play something and you're trying to set a mood and it's just literally a buzz kill. That was a bad pun. But if you're looking for solutions, fear not, this video is all about how to find the culprits of your string buzzing and how to fix it. So I'm going to be going over some conventional and also some unconventional tips in this video. Now, before we get into some solutions on how to practically work through string buzzing, there is one thing that I have to mention, is that maybe the string buzzing isn't you. Maybe it's your instrument. When students of mine have brought in these old instruments and they're trying to play and they're like, why isn't anything working? I mean, old strings can cause string buzz. It could be that the neck is warped and twisted because this is a wooden instrument. If it hasn't been properly stored and humidified and taken care of, the instrument hasn't been played in a while, there could be something wrong with the neck tension. So my advice is that take it into a tech, get some new strings on it, see if there's any problems that could be fixed, but also there are some problems on your guitar that just, they're too far gone. And in that case, it's best to invest in a new instrument. Here we go. The first step in your quest for clarity lies in the art of finger placement. Ensure that your fingers are right behind the frets, not too far back, not too close. Too far back, there's not enough pressure and you have to work harder. Too close and you don't get any clarity. I find that right behind or as close to the fret as you possibly can is the sweet spot. This allows for a clean connection between the strings and frets, minimizing muffled tones. So let's experiment with the D chord first. So I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to just slide them toward the headstock a little bit. I'm going to push down on the strings. I mean, you can hear those muffled strings. Not great. Now I'm going to scooch them up as close to the fret as I possibly can without being on top of it. I'm actually not pushing down any harder than I was before. So now we have every string rings out crystal clear. If you're on top of the fret, you're going to hear something muffled. Like that. And so just bring it back just a little bit. That was my middle finger here on the E string. There you go. So experiment with that. Maybe scooch your fingers up a little closer to the fret as you possibly can. If you can't be right behind the fret, that's okay. Just get a little closer and then experiment. I think you're going to find that you're actually working a lot less and pushing less down on the string than if you did if your fingers were further away from the fret. Striking the right balance in finger pressure is key. Press too hard and you risk bending the strings out of tune. Press too lightly and you invite the muffled tones to take center stage. So experiment and find the sweet spot for each chord. So let's use a G chord for this example. I've had students where they're really pushing really hard that they end up bending the strings. Oh, that's really terrible. Ease off on the gas pedal, scooch your fingers as close to the frets as you possibly can, and then experiment. Another way to experiment is just take your finger, place it on a string, lightly touch the string, strum the string, or pluck it, and then gently apply pressure to the string, and then stop when you hear a clear sound. Most of the time, people are actually squeezing too hard. They're applying too much pressure. The next is thumb positioning. With certain chords, you want it slightly behind the neck, and then other times you want it peaking above. This brings me into kind of, some difference in philosophy of teaching. I have heard some other teachers, they say that your thumb should never be on top, should never be peeking up, it should always be behind. And I've heard other teachers say that thumb needs to be visible so that you can mute this low E string. I'm very much a situational kind of person. The majority of the time, my thumb is curled up over the top so that when I'm playing a D chord, I am muting that low E string like that. And then plus, I get this really great C clamp when my hand, do you see that? Ugh, it's hugging this portion of my hand right here between my thumb and my forefinger. It is just hugging that neck like this, and I really get a nice clamp. I'm able to just get a really nice squeeze when I'm playing my chords. And then, with bar chords, obviously my thumb positioning is behind like this. So I think it's very situational. different teachers are going to disagree. But I think you should experiment with that, because if you don't have proper thumb position in certain chords, you're going to find that you're actually working a lot harder than you need to. Speaking of working harder, you may be inadvertently touching adjacent strings with your fretting hand or with other fingers. This accidental contact can stifle the vibration of other strings, resulting in a muffled sound. So let's experiment with the C chord right here. Some of these fingers, they're laying a little flat, and I'm going to be plucking each string, and I'm going to find the culprits. My index finger is laying just a little bit flat. I should use the tip of my finger and then make it a little taller and move it out of the way slightly. Not overcompensate. You're going to have to experiment just how much you're going to have to move out of the way so that that string rings out. Hey, Editing Katie here. So I wanted to show you one more thing. Speaking of, fingers bumping strings, especially on the open D right here and the A. I want you to think about it this way. I heard it from a clinic of a friend of mine. His name is Craig Chi, and he referred to this as piano fingers versus violin fingers. Piano straight up and down, violin to an angle. So instead of your D thinking straight up and down like this, you're gonna have a tendency of bumping other strings. Do you see that? It's just gonna also be a little uncomfortable. Rotate your wrist a little bit this way. See how my thumb wants to rest on top, so it mutes that E string, boom. Piano fingers, violin fingers, and then they move out of the way so that they don't bump other strings. Genius. All right, now we have A, instead of straight up and down like this, you see that? Move your wrist, boom. Thumb wants to rest on top to mute that E string, look at that. I've seen this time and time again where you're strumming way too hard. Be aggressive, be aggressive. And I say, sometimes that's not the solution. Ease off of the gas pedal or get a lighter pick. Now here's the last part, which is some unexpected advice, is that you may have to go lighter. Maybe a lighter pick, perhaps. Or maybe change the gauge of your strings to something a little lighter. Sometimes we have instruments that we play that aren't really suited for us where we are right now. Had some students just say that, the strings feel just so stiff and it's just so hard to play. They got the action adjusted and it's still pretty difficult for them. So I say change to a lighter gauge of strings. It doesn't have to be expensive, because string changes, they're a relatively inexpensive way to modify your guitar. And then they find that, oh my goodness, the tension is just lighter. The strings, yeah, it can change the tone of the instrument to a bit brighter than what you would like. But what it does is that it just gets them past the frustration of, man, these strings are just too stiff, I need a little bit more give, or a lighter gauged pick. Again, that's going to change the tone of the instrument a little bit, but sometimes you need less tension in order just to get past that point of frustration. And then once you get used to that, you can always switch back. Now let's talk about how we can incorporate these types of tips into our practice routine so that we can have consistency and clarity while playing. Usually the culprits of buzzing strings are the usual suspects, or they're consistently coming from certain fingers within certain chords. While you're playing and you notice there's a chord that's buzzing, slow down and play each string individually. Note which strings are buzzing and then go through the checklist that I mentioned to troubleshoot what to do. Is it being muffled by a neighboring finger? Is your finger too close or too far away from the fret? I would say make those chords your warm-up before you just jump into the song. Practice transitioning between those two chords, or just maybe 2 or 3, I would say, no more than 3, and then you're really going to get that in your muscle memory. Then maybe add that within the context of the song, and then add the strumming pattern. If you do too much at once, it just becomes really overwhelming and frustrating. My next advice is keep going. Don't stop while you're practicing. And what I mean by that is that most of the time when we hear something that is a sour note or some buzzing, we stop. For example, we have a D chord, we hear buzzing, and then we stop in between. What you're doing is that you're training yourself to stop. We're not going to play things with 100% clarity all of the time. Just keep strumming and keep moving, and then you can make those adjustments as you play. You are not the only one that struggles with this. every player is going to play a sour note, a buzzing note here and there. It just happens. It's the nature of us as humans, which are imperfect, and also the nature of the instrument. When that happens, try to keep going, troubleshoot, go through the different steps that I told you, maybe take it into a guitar tech, and then perhaps you can find some freedom while you're playing. If you're new to the guitar and you're like, man, I just really want a strong foundation in this instrument, I made a guitar course called the Stress-Free Guide to Playing the Acoustic Guitar. So it's over here. Learn to play the fun, the fast, the stress-free way. And if you're looking for something free and you want to build some more chords in your muscle memory, I have some more YouTube videos over here that are free. And I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you are loved. Bye.